Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be about a book. So normally the books I have posted in the past have been fantasy or historical fiction or at least some variation of fiction. This is a nonfiction book, and there are story elements used to relay the information, but the anatomy of the book is fact. So the book that we're going to be talking about today, and one of my favorites of the past year, is called Witch Hunt. This is one of my favorites. I loved it so much. It's actually called Witch Hunt, A Traveler's Guide to the Power and Persecution of the Witch. It's a pretty long title, and it's by Kristin Soleil, and it is such a good book. It is kind of an account of witch hunts from all across, I want to say, America and Europe. So Italy, France, Germany, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Because it actually starts in Europe, so Europe is the one that brought that over to the US. But it's a really good read. We all hear the term witch hunt thrown around just without thought, haphazardly, I should say. And there's a lot behind that term, especially for anyone who identifies as a woman or in any aspect of the gender binary. I say binary and I roll my eyes at that because binary is so weird thinking because it's just the gender spectrum, but I digress. It's a difficult, complex topic because throughout history, witch hunts have been used as ways to oppress and silence and really harm and murder women throughout history and different cultures. So whenever witch hunt, the term is thrown around very carelessly, I notice it. And so I love this book because it details all of the nitty-gritty of where, they started, the witch hunts started, and, why they were accused and all of that. And I like the way that it's told because it's told in like a story format. The author, went to all of the sites that she talks about in the book, and she walked through there and imagined those scenes happening, the real life scenes happening. And so you get the story from her perspective of imagining it, and then the facts come in, as she details what happened there. So it's a really good way of storytelling, and it's one of the reasons I really love this book, because it's not just, here are some facts, like this is what happened, and this is how many people died, and blah, blah, blah. It's told in a story format, so it makes it more interesting, and you follow it easier, too. And so I'm very excited to read more of her work. I highly recommend this book to anyone, really. But especially if you're interested in anything related to witches or anything like that, I think you will like this book because obviously it doesn't detail real witch magic, I guess you could say, but it does detail the traditions and talismans and different things that are now associated with witches. So I'm going to read the little synopsis here in the front of the book, and then we'll go forward. But okay. Traveling through cities and sites across Italy, France, Germany, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the United States, Kristin J. Soleil, a second-generation witch herself, explores the witch as a figure of female power and persecution. By infusing an adventurous first-person narrative with extensive research and imaginative historical fiction, Witch Hunt captures the magic of travel to make an often overlooked period of history come alive. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, a confluence of social, political, and religious factors inspired witch hysteria to ignite like wildfire across Europe and later parts of America. At the heart of the witch hunts were often dangerous misconceptions about femininity and female sexuality, and women were disproportionately punished as a result. Today, this lineage of oppression remains an important reference point through which we can contemplate women's rights and human rights in the Western world and beyond. Witch Hunt isn't only an exploration of the horrors of history, but also uncovers how the witch has been rehabilitated. For witches are not just haunting figures of the past. The witch is also a liberatory icon and identity of the present. So, if that doesn't get you interested, I don't know what will, because man, I read that and I go, yes, I remember reading this and then reading the book for the first time, and I just love it. It's so good. I think it's one of my favorite books I read last year. Like I said, it's a little different, but at the same time, not really, because like I said, historical fiction. I mean, there's truth, there are facts, there's how everything happened and everything, but it's, you know, I love this. I love how that looks. This is like just a page or two in. I think it looks so cool. And I am going to go ahead and read the first page. I like how the table of contents is written, because it goes, you go through time, but also going through place. So the first part starts in Italy, and then it goes on to France, and then it moves on to Germany, and then it moves on to Ireland, and then England, and then Scotland, and then the US, ending in New York. So there's an introduction, but let's see, is that part? Let's see. I'm trying to decide if I want to read the first page of the introduction or... Let's do both. Why not? It's my video. I can do what I want. So the introduction, the first page of the introduction, is, the witch is a traveler. She has traversed continents, cultures, and epochs, carrying with her millennia of conflicting ideas about sex and gender, magic and power. The witch has made us travelers too. She leads us on a journey through the horrors and wonders of myth and history. Seeking the timeless archetypal witch, those who were branded witches century ago, and those who identify as witches today, requires travel both literal and figurative. Witch Hunt is a guide through this mercurial terrain. Witch Hunt traces the legacy of the witch through significant sites across Europe and North America. Witches no doubt appear in cultures across the world, but the witch who looms largest within the nebulous conceptual region we call the West, the monstrous maiden out to seduce and destroy men, the satanic sorceress hell-bent on killing crops and livestock, the horrible hag out to consume children, was born in ancient myths, raised in medieval times, and came to full furious fruition in the early modern era. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, thousands of people accused of witchcraft suffered and died. Families were ripped apart. Villages were decimated. Terror, torture, and paranoia ravaged communities. It is a delicate matter to craft a travel guide through such horrifying episodes in human history. Whenever we immerse ourselves in periods of historical oppression, we run the risk of glamorizing or aestheticizing them, which can make light of real people's pain and trauma. First and foremost, this book aims to honor the victims of the witch hunts. So that's the first page of the introduction. It's only a few pages long, but that's the first page. And I think it really sets the tone for the book, because I love how it's very serious and then a little playful, as, you know, the hints towards the way the witch is like perceived. The monstrous maiden out to seduce and destroy men. The satanic sorceress hell-bent on killing crops and livestock. Like, I love the, you know, it's almost playful. So, and it's kind of like that throughout the whole book. So like there's moments of severity and sincerity, but the comical moments of pointing out the obviously hysterical nature of these ridiculous myths is really funny. And I think if you like a little bit of comedy mixed in with your trauma, you'll like this. So this is the first page of the first chapter. And the first chapter, like I said, starts in Italy. On I'm not gonna try to pronounce the name of this chapter because it has an Italian word and I'm gonna butcher it, so we're gonna leave it alone. I will show it to you. If you can read it, have at it. I am teaching myself Italian, but I'm not that good yet. So, Florence, Italy. Sometimes the past is palpable. Tendrils of memory push through in unexpected ways, twisting the veil of time. Oblivious people traipse by, unaware of the stories that played out beneath their feet. Despite the revisions of progress that transform local terrain, we're left with a magical palimpsest. That is a different word, isn't it? I know I knew it before, and now I'm blanking on how to pronounce it, but I think it's palimpsest. In places where the unspeakable occurred. Sometimes a monument or a map marks the spot. Other times it's a feeling you can't shake, forcing you to flip through your guidebook or interrogate the locals, desperate for clues. Sometimes a place all but screams, something happened here. This feeling floats like a fog across the center of old Florence, a city known for its taste, renowned art and architecture exalting the glory of God, gustatory pleasures, tempting even the most avowed ascetic. It's also a city where history has been written and rewritten, compressing the most marginal voices into a howling din. Apathy threatens to silence them, but if you open yourself up to it, they're there. So obviously there's a lot of very, I want to say like high vocab words in this book. So if you're looking to learn some new words or even just expose yourself to a different language, basically, because most people don't speak like this. This is more of an academic book than anything, even though there is some ways of telling it through a narrative that might make it historical fiction, but it is more of an academic book. So, but it's such a good read. It really is. Obviously, there's not really like spoilers for this book, like really spoilers, because it's more just tales of stories that happened in the past and those who were accused of witchcraft. But I have not given away any of that. So in case you were worried I had said any spoilers, I promise I didn't. I am going to go now into more details of the book and some of the stories that were talked about. So if you don't want to hear any of that because it is spoiler to you, then I recommend closing the video now. And thank you so much for watching. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the stories in this book because they really are just, it's really just heartbreaking, you know? I mean, we know most people have heard the term witch hunts, and I think if you've gone to any school, public school or anything, for the most part it's been touched in history class or literary class, depending, especially if you read The Crucible. But it's also something that's still not really discussed in depth, I think. And one of the very first witch hunts and victims of the witch hunt was Joan of Arc. And I didn't know that. I've heard her name all the time throughout history. I think almost everybody has. And if you've watched Bill and Ted's Adventures, you've seen her portrayed in that movie. So she's a very famous historical figure. And yet I wasn't aware of just how much witch hunts and all of that had to do with her death, because she was so young. So she was from France. You know, her name, Joan of Arc, is more of the, you know, English version of her name, because her name was actually Jean, Jean, I think. Or maybe it was Joan. No, I was right. It's just with an extra N and an E, because I was looking at it and I was like, that's not right. That's the male version. So her name is Jeanne, but it's like Jeanne. But she went, I want to say she went by, history refers to her as Joan. But she, trying to see if it says what era, what year she was from. 1431 is when she was executed. And it's just so interesting because, I mean, I think, you know, what we know about her is she was brave. She was basically a soldier, and she was. And she was a very devoted woman, very devoted to her country, to her religion. And her claim was that she had a divine interaction that told her that it was her duty to save France. And so that was when she took a vow of chastity to prepare herself for a life of godly service. And that's when she ran away from home, dressed up as a soldier, and decided to fight to save France, because I think there was a lot of going on in France at the time, some civil wars and things. But she was such an iconic, inspirational person in history. And it's interesting to learn just how much she was touched by the witch trials. And I'm trying to find the specific place that I had it in here. Okay, so she was accused of witchcraft. It does say that here. She was accused of witchcraft, but that's not all that killed her. It turns out that she was found guilty of all 12 articles of condemnation against her, which included her decidedly unchristian connection to superstition surrounding the fairy tree, her angelic voices and prophecies, her refusal to submit to the church's authority, and her constant company keeping with male soldiers and wearing of men's clothing. So, and I think that's something that is a really good thing to point out here, and I'll make this my last point so that I don't drag on this video, but it wasn't just people accused of witchcraft that were hurt and killed throughout the witch hunt. It was also people that fell out of the norm, that did something, or always did something, once or twice or maybe all the time, that was considered not normal, definitely even not acceptable. So her dressing in men's clothing was one of the basically final nails in the coffin that sealed her fate to be executed. And I think that's why it's because witch hunts are not just a women's issue. They're a feminist issue. And the reason why is because feminism is not just about women's rights. It's about human rights. It's about equalizing femininity among everybody. It has nothing to do with just femininity in just women. It has everything to do with everything outside the binary that people in history have tried to squash and oppress and kill for. And that's what's so important about reading books like these. It's really important to recognize that there are people in power who will do whatever it takes, including kill people, to keep the world the way they want it, even if that's not what's best. And this book details that in ways. And it's one of the reasons Joan of Arc was executed, murdered, basically. And I believe she was burned at the stake. Yeah, it was, she was burned at the stake in 1431. She was actually declared innocent in her 1496 nullity trial. But, you know, too little too late. She was already dead. But she was killed in 1431. And it was in the square. It was in the middle of the square in France, in the heart of Rouen. And that's where her stake was. They burned her at the stake. She's also attributed as being like a female saint too, because she was so devout in her belief of her basically mission that she heard from God or other saints or something. And because I think it was both. And so she was very devout and she was very loyal and everything, but she was so fierce and so determinedly unfeminine that she was killed for it, basically. And in a manner that basically the country at the time celebrated, because they were like, she's a witch, kill her. And there's a lot of stories like that in this book. And like it was said in the introduction, witch hunts have happened all over the world in all cultures and countries. But the ones we know and hear about the most that are extremely gruesome and cruel have happened in Europe and the US, which, surprise. So it's so worth a read. I know it's a little bit of a darker topic. It's not exactly one of the happy ones that is a feel-good one. It's one of the darker ones. I agree with that. That's why you need both. It's a good balance. You know, you have this and then you have a feel-good book. You go back and forth. But it's just so interesting and important. It's both. It's not just like a fun little story to read. It's important to the past and the present. Very, very accurate and current to the present. And I think it's a really important read. And I really highly recommend this book. I am looking forward to reading more of Kristin J. Soleil's work. I have such a big stack of books though, so it'll be a bit, but I will get to it. But I hope that if you read it, you enjoy it as much as I did, because she has a really good way of, like I said, weaving the facts and the parts of history into like a narrative that makes sense and keeps your interest. So it's such a good book. I can't recommend it enough, honestly. But that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching if you made it all the way through. I love making videos about books. I am such a bookworm, and I love that sometimes there are other people that will find my videos and feel the same way. So if you also love books, thank you so much for watching as well. I think that books are one of the coolest things in the world because there's just an endless amount of them. And it'll just always be fun to read and just always interesting. Keeps your mind occupied. So it really means a lot to me when anyone comes and watches my videos, even for just a little. So thank you so much for coming and watching and hopefully enjoying. If you enjoyed this video, you can like, comment. I will see it, I promise. If you really like my content, please subscribe to my channel. You will get notified when I upload videos on Fridays and hopefully more soon. And that is all. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.